Thank you everybody for joining us today on this beautifully rainy day. I was just joking with Peng that if we had a fireplace, it would be the perfect setting for a fireside chat. So I just want to say hello to everybody that took the time to join us. Also want to say thank you for those people who actually joined us in the earlier morning workshop. We try to make this as interactive as possible. Just a few housekeeping rules. I'm going to be having a dialogue with Peng, obviously, but if you have any questions that you want to ask, in the chats, the chat box, the chat icon is below on your screen. So feel free to type in any questions you might have. We can't promise that we will answer or have the time to answer every single one, but we'll definitely try. So yeah, that's the best way to feel. And just feel free to just ask anything. Don't worry about, whether it's a silly question or you think silly. Nothing silly, just feel free to ask, okay? Okay, so with that in mind, again, thank you very much. I wanted to give my usual kind of like pre-dialogue speech, right, about why Peng is here today. Now, as you know, I've been doing these sessions quite a lot, quite often, the whole of last year and so on and so forth. And I'm very, very happy to always work with IBF fellows. I always find that each of them have a story to tell. And then for me, as a career advisor, my challenge has always been to find an angle, in terms of what kind of value can I get from the inside of an IBF fellow that's relating to employability. So for me, when I looked at Peng's background, right, immediately it came to me. How many of us actually know people who started in a specific job, for example, and have stayed throughout, in this specific role? Right? Friends who are accountants stay as accountants forever, engineers stay as engineers forever. I found that when I looked at Peng's kind of background, he managed to go from something that was very, very narrow, in my humble opinion, and moving up to something very broad, like the business manager or CEO of a business. So for me, that was a very interesting thing, because if there was a way to diversify one's experience, I think I definitely want to hear how Peng did it. Okay, so whatever you're going to be hearing today is really not rehearsed. I mean, I just thought of something, some angles, some questions I want to ask you. I may have missed some, so feel free to ask anything that you think that I missed. Okay, so with that in mind, Peng, sir, thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, it's my pleasure. And thank you so much for inviting me. And also to everyone who has dialed in to hear a 50-year-old reflecting on his career path and sharing his views.
Oh, it's going to be very valuable. I'm going to be sure it's going to be very valuable. Okay, so again, for the people that actually seen these sessions, they will always know that my first opening shot, opening salvo, is about my guest's personal history. In this case, it's you, Peng. So the first question, interestingly for you, covers the overall theme of the session. So I found it very interesting that when you started, you were actually an accountant, a rather, narrow kind of a specific role. So the overall question, the first one is, how did you manage to ultimately get into such a broad role like the one that you are now, right? And how did you even move across industries, right? So perhaps we can start with you giving us an overview of, sort of your professional history for people who may not know your background like I do. Over to you. Yeah.
Sure. Maybe I'll try and keep it brief. So I've worked since 1997. So that's 25 years of employment. Now, during this period of time, I've been with 5 companies and I took on 8 roles. So yes, you're right. I mean, I started as an accountant with MOF, which is a relatively narrow field, but it was not a linear progression from narrow to broad, from how you thought about it. I've joined PwC Consulting in a relatively broad consulting role. And then I went into a narrow project management role with HSBC before joining the retail bank as a head of change and control, which by and large was a generalist role. I then went abroad to head the creation of a global function in records management. Now, that is probably one of the most narrow field you can find. And after 5 years in UK and Switzerland, I then returned to take on a COO role with HSBC Life Singapore, which, as you said, it is quite a broad role. So maybe with this context, let me start by making the first point. If anyone on this call is thinking about moving from a specialist role to a generalist role, or vice versa, at least my experience tells me that good employers are generally open-minded about it, but just do make sure that you give a solid reason why you're making the switch.
I think it's a very, very good point, Peng. So the way you have articulated this, right? I'm going to preempt what people on the call might be thinking. You say, hey, they might be thinking, hey, like, camping, when if you want something to happen, it happens. When you move from this to this, it feels so smooth. But surely there must, it must be more than just because you want to move. You thought about moving, you can move. I'm sure that along the journey of your journey, broad, narrow, there must be people, managers, situations that give you opportunity, people that supported you. How did you do that? I mean, because presumably for many people on this call, making moves is not so easy. Say only can move, you know what I mean? So how did you gain that confidence, visibility, trust, support, such that you managed to make these career moves seemingly so smoothly? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I would love to say that I have a godfather, that orchestrate all my moves, right? But unfortunately, I don't. If I look back at all the job moves I have made, 5 out of 8 arose because I proactively chased for the opportunity.
Proactivity, okay. Yeah.
I.e., I saw the job advert, I applied for it. Or maybe I should say, I saw many job adverts and I applied for it and I got it, right? So slightly more than 60%, is because of proactive chasing of an opportunity. Of the remaining 3, one came about because I have a chance encounter in a conference, believe it or not. Another was because of an introduction from someone in my network. And only one move was actually down to recognition by senior management. So to be honest, I've never moved because of a headhunter. I know sometimes we hear amazing stories about, oh, so-and-so was headhunted, to another company with a big pay increase, or so-and-so was handed a big job just like that, with
Yeah.
never happens to me. So if I really have to pick the success factors, I would go with resilience and open-mindedness. Be prepared to put in the effort of going through all this process and keep an open mind when you do a job search.
I think
I'm not saying that networking and having a likable personalities are not important. These are also important, but it's always a bonus if you can get a new job because of your network. But in my view, don't expect it.
I totally agree. And I think, again, for the people that are here, we didn't rehearse this. So whatever Camping said is the stuff that you probably hear if you engage one of us or you speak to one of us. There are a few things that when I'm listening to him say, I just want to reiterate about the importance of ultimately maximizing your chances of getting it, right? So, Camping, like what you mentioned, you didn't ever use a headhunter. You said one of them was support of a senior manager. So visibility is something that we talk about, right? And then networking is also something that we talk about relentlessly about, and putting in good applications, and putting in good applications also, sort of like channel back to whether or not your resume looks good and so on and so forth. So I really like that, kind of like that, the answer that you gave, because it really gels with what we do as, career advisors. And so the next question I wanted to ask, like just jumping into the industry itself, like this whole idea of working in like the insurance, for example, to be perfectly honest, it's not a job area that is top of mind, fall off the lips of people, because I honestly think maybe it's a little bit misunderstood, for example, right? So what were your own discoveries when you went into the insurance industry, the different types of insurers and things like that? Can you demystify it for, can you tell us a bit more about your experience and just the industry in general? And it'd be beneficial for me as well, because, this is something that I find myself, even as a career advisor, perhaps not lacking in certain knowledge as well in this space.
Yeah, right. So I've joined insurance 7 years ago, insurance industry 7 years. At that time, my last job was in a tobacco industry. So imagine the change that I have to go through from a tobacco industry into insurance. But I would say that I've learned that a lot of my perception about insurance, is wrong. And I'm happy just to find a few angles to share with you. Now, insurance is often said to be a recession-proof industry. So many surveys have actually shown that Singaporeans are relatively underinsured when compared to other developed countries, which means that in my interpretation, this industry will continue to grow for many more years to come. Now, insurance is also generally regarded as a laggard when it comes to innovation and digitization.
Okay.
Especially when you compare that with the consumer banking, which is getting a lot of limelight. So I do think that the insurance industry as a whole is desperate for talents. People with project management skill sets, digital implementation experience, customer journey design. Just to name a few. Data protection, data architect roles are also quite hot in the market. Now, insurance is also multifaceted because within the insurance industry, you have groups of companies that are doing life insurance. There are also a group of companies that does general insurance.
Yep.
There is a group of companies that does both, which is therefore composite. With health insurance coming in, you also have the reinsurers, you also have the brokers, and you also have the agencies. So if your perhaps idea of insurance is still staying at insurance and going around selling insurance, I think that has gone away, right? There is just a lot of facets to insurance, and every part of it actually requires people and requires talent. So I do get a message to say that my connection is unstable. I hope you guys are hearing me well.
Yeah, so far so good. So far so good.
Okay.
It lags a little bit, but you come back quite quickly, you recover quite quickly. So not to worry. So far so good.
Okay, that's good.
I want to, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I thought of something, but you go ahead first, Peng.
So I think that for people on the call, right, if you have insurance experience in your CV, I think you'll find easy to rejoin the industry. But if you do not have any insurance experience, just like myself, 7 years ago, I would say that actually the barriers to entry can be managed. My point is that don't worry if insurance is not an industry you're familiar with. Go ahead and apply for it if you think the job looks interesting. That's what I would like to say.
Okay, I want to just jump in here, just to pick up on what you said, just reacting to what you said. And I also want to be totally transparent because my sessions, we try to make it as frank as possible. And this calls for audience participation. So for the people here, okay, let's be honest, for the people here in this little nice cozy group fireside chat, in the chat box, can you comment on your perceptions of the insurance industry? I mean, like, let's be honest, right? Because one of the things I want to find out as well is how you guys perceive insurance. Would you work in an insurance industry? I mean, or for example, why would you not consider working in insurance industry? Do you feel that it is the so-called poor cousin to retail banking or something like that? What's your perception of it, and why might you stay away from it? Or maybe why would you? What might attract you to it? Some comments in the chat, if you don't mind. Just let's be honest, just be frank, because these things could end up as questions that we can try to answer later as well. Yeah. So let me give people some time to think about their comments. I definitely want to hear some comments as well. But moving on, right? For myself, Kian Peng, when I think about the insurance industry, I always think, oh, sales. I know, and so on and so forth. I want to know from your perspective, right? Maybe you can talk a little bit more about those ancillary roles, right? That are also still in very, very demand, very well regarded type of opportunities within the industry that are not necessarily sales oriented. What other sort of types of opportunities are there in the industry that people should really pay attention to, apart from just looking at banks and banking opportunities? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so Adrian, I think I've given some examples earlier.
Yeah, you did.
In my earlier comment, right? I'm talking about the fact that digital implementation or anything that deals with digital marketing, those are very popular right now. Project management, if you have demonstrated that you can manage portfolios and program management, I think these skill sets are going to be very relevant to the insurance. Anything that deals with data governance, data management, data protection, data architect, these are also again very hot in the market. As I mentioned, customer journey, because it's tied back to digital insurance remit. Again, this part is going to be very, very popular. There are also some other compliance parts. So for example, if you have done some of the risk management, jobs in in the consumer banking. Again, insurance are generally very open-minded about bringing these people into the insurance sort of, I guess, embrace. So
Yeah.
so again, I think that will be great. I think ultimately, maybe we can spend some time talking about this, right? I mean, ultimately, um, at, at any point in our career, I mean, there are four paths, right, that we can do. Either you stick to the same industry and you do the same job, or you stick to the same industry and do a different job, or you change your industry, do the same job, and change industry and do a different job, right? So here's my take, right? And Adrian, feel free to
Yeah. Yeah.
disagree.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
I think 80% of all job applicants tend to go with the first one. Same
Okay.
industry, same job.
Yes, precisely. Yeah.
Because it feels right, because it feels safe. You know what is expected. You don't have to relearn. You are comfortable. There's nothing wrong about it because, of course, we are all human beings, right?
Yep.
After all.
Yep.
So whenever you look for job opportunities, chances are you will pay attention to those that's in the same industry and with the same job title.
Yep.
But what I'm trying to say is that if you're in a job that's very hot in the market, let's say, for example, you are in cybersecurity, digital marketing, I would say that I think this is a perfectly legitimate strategy. But if you think that the market is already saturated or worse shrinking in where you are, and that your job may not be so perhaps in demand in the market right now, then I think that you are limiting yourself. I think people are limiting themselves. So I've reflect back and I've actually gone down all the four paths at different stages of my work life.
Right.
I've done multiple jobs in the financial services sector. I've moved from financial services to tobacco industry, doing the same job. And in my last job, I've changed both industry and both job nature at the same time. I mean, I like to think that I'm stronger now because of the variety of experiences I've gained. And as a manager, I mean, I do believe that a candidate can bring more value to the table if he or she can show some diversity in a CV. So my point is that while the audience are answering your question,
Yeah.
would they consider joining insurance? I think if you're looking for job opportunities and if you are in a saturated market, I think you should take the chance and apply for a different job or a job in a different industry.
Okay.
In fact, I would say make it a practice. For every 3 jobs you apply, see if you can apply for one that is in a totally different industry, like insurance.
That's a very interesting point. Now, going to jump onto what you said. Okay. Now, you have probably seen lots of resumes, and I think maybe the answer is already there already. But would you say that, okay, so for yourself, I'm guessing that if you see the resume of someone who wants to get into the industry, you are a bit aligned to, or you'll be quite impressed with people people who have changed industry. Do you feel like like your colleagues have the same, or do you think that your peers, the industry itself, prefers this? So what I'm trying to say is that, okay, like what you mentioned, right? 80% of the people, 90% of people, or 99% of people are always going to be applying for what they know in the same industry, and so on and so forth. Why? Because as I mentioned in the synopsis of this session, transferability, maximum transferability of skills in the same industry sort of almost guarantees practical things like compensation, right, and so on and so forth, right? Whereas you do this change and so on and so forth. So for yourself, right, I put you on the spot, sorry. If you are looking at 2 CVs, one of them is a career changer. Let's say, like someone like you, and then someone is like literally, plug and play. Really, how you choose? As in, like, okay, so I just want to ask, what's your perception? So that's question part 1. How would Kian Peng think about how to strike? You can only hire one, right? Which one you hire? The next one is, do you think that your or your decision is shared by maybe your peers or maybe even the industry? I know it's a tough question. Sorry, just ask. Yeah.
I mean, I would say that the employers in the insurance industry, at least those that I've come across, I think they are very open-minded. I've seen many appointments that actually happens because they bring in someone from outside of the insurance industry. Even when I recruit my direct reports over the last 7 years, which I've done many times, I would say that majority of them came outside of insurance industry. So I would think that having diversity and the courage to to change industry and be able to articulate how it applies, what you have learned in your previous job or previous industry, how it can apply to the insurance industry. I think in that interview, if you are able to do that, I think it's kudos to you. I think it's just it adds points to you. Now, of course, if we look at the insurance industry, there is sort of, in a way, two broad groups of roles that we're talking about, two broad group of roles that people are hiring, right? One group obviously requires very technical insurance knowledge, particularly around pricing and actuarial and underwriting. Now, this obviously you will need some training in order to get into those roles, right? But I think by and large for the audience today, right, we are looking at other jobs that actually are also non-sales, but they are how to say in many industries.
Yeah.
Right? So for example, we talk about risk management, project management, data, management, and so on. I mean, these are transferable knowledge, regardless of the industry. And actually, I do see a lot of people with those experience are coming into the industry. I don't see that there is a barrier. As I said, I think the barrier can be managed. Personally.
Yeah. So would you say that, okay, maybe I'm providing an answer. So coming back to the original question, right? I mean, if you get someone who's a career changer, someone who comes from, let's say, a pharmaceutical industry, want to pivot into an insurance industry or some other background, would you say that compared to a plug and play person, that this person, the career changer, would have a very strong fighting chance if he or she articulates the transferable skills as best as possible, so they can stand shoulder to shoulder with the plug and play person? Would you say that?
I would, yes, I would say that. I don't think that anyone who is changing industry is in a disadvantage.
Right.
My personal experience is that actually it adds diversity and it adds creativity to to the whole conversation. And if you are able to articulate, and of course, I mean, you have to rehearse, right? You can, go on the spot and think that, okay, I'm going to the interview and I'll just say what I want to say, right? You have to rehearse. You have to give yourself a very solid reason why you're changing industry, why you think that this is the job for you, and how you can apply your skills, to the job. I think you're definitely, I think you're definitely not disadvantaged.
Okay, then again, just latching on to what you said, Peng. Like, okay, so we presume that someone with let's say a career-changing resume has done a wonderful job at articulating his or her skills lah. And I hope that many of your peers and even the HR or talent acquisition will also adopt the same mindset. Hopefully they do lah.
No, as I said, I think I've seen a lot of examples that people are open-minded about it. Because the insurance industry in Singapore are just just does not have enough talents within which to sustain the growth. And therefore that's how they have been growing in the last few years, and I do see that that's going to be that will continue.
And so on the back of that, I want to ask, right, for our friends who are here, right, are there any resources or Telegram groups, I don't know what are LinkedIn groups that you might know of, right, that people can actually do some self-study or to investigate a bit more in terms of, or maybe even doing like informal networking or reaching out to people? Is there any such things? Sorry, this is just came out on top of my head, so just wondering whether you know of any helpful resources lah. Because my worry has always been people write a wonderful CV, put into the system, but then they never get any call. So I always encourage people to be very proactive, and I think proactivity comes with finding out more about industry, networking people. Are there any such resources for folks here who are interested in finding out more? Yeah.
Okay. So in the insurance industry, as I said, it is multifaceted, right? And therefore each sector actually has its own industry association that has a website that has a lot of reference materials in it.
Okay.
So the life insurers have LIA, which is the Life Association of Singapore. And then you have the general insurers have GIA, the reinsurers have SRA, and so on and so forth, RBAS. So I mean, start with LIA and GIA, right? Because these two associations manage most number of insurance companies in Singapore. And go to their website and take a look at what they have, what they offer on their website. I think that would be great. Even just of course you don't have to digest and and memorize everything that they have, right? But you just go to the reference and just see what are the recent circulars that they have they have published. Like recently, both of them has published papers around content culture, because it's a very hot topic right now.
Okay.
Best practice guidelines. You know, um, have a basic understanding of it, and then think about how that can apply to to the job that you're applying to. If during the interview you can show that you have that you show a little bit of interest in knowing what is happening in the industry, I think it goes a long way in convincing the employer that you're not just applying for fun, right?
Applying for
That
fun, yeah.
that you really think seriously about this, and you are able to connect the dots.
I think that's a wonderful advice, Camping. That's wonderful advice. So, just to summarize, and maybe I missed something, right? A lot of times when we work with job seekers, and when my team and we work with job seekers, right? I think that we have this ideal where it's a linear path, right? You put in a CV, you get a call, you get a call, you get an interview, you get an interview, you get maybe more interviews in the offer. I think that the struggle is even getting interviews, So for yourself, right? In order to get an interview, one must assume that the resume is eye-catching enough. So that's one thing. Resume must be really good. And so is there anything else that people you think can do for themselves? So maybe networking and industry associations, but anything else that our friends here can benefit from your advice in terms of maximizing their chances of being able to get in front of someone, right? And I think the advice that you give or we share is even valuable for them, even outside of insurance. It can applicable to any industry, right? Because it is the same formula in that sense. Do you have any other things to add beside, good resume, networking, industry associations, and any other things that we may have missed? You think?
No, I mean just touch on those meetings and networking, right? The way that you can build your network, right? If you're not already in the industry,
yeah,
that you go to some conferences, some industry conferences, but unfortunately because of COVID, a lot of this has sort of becomes virtual, and and it's very hard to build networks from there. So take advantage of some of the other, perhaps not so much of an insurance conferences, like for example the FinTech Festival, right? FinTech Festival, hopefully this year is going to be in person again. Just going to such FinTech customers and and proactively practice yourself to talk to people, force yourself to talk to people.
Yeah, agree.
I think that will really helps. That will really helps because you get to meet not just people from insurance, you get to meet people from various segments of the financial services industry, right? And you never know what will come out of it.
I
because
totally
fundamentally,
agree.
I think the FinTech Festival is sort of, I guess, telling us that once you have an interest and once you have exposure, actually it doesn't matter whether you're going into a life insurer or going to a consumer banker or going to a commercial bank. If you're doing a digital implementation, it is a digital implementation.
I totally agree. So I think while we're talking, I'm also just keeping an eye on the chat and the questions, right? So I asked that question just now. So a couple of people say that okay, they still see it as a lot of product pushing, like Terence said, still see it as product pushing and solutions and so on. So not necessarily best fitting for the customer or this kind of thing. And then also DK also mentioned perceive it to be a sales role. And I think from my perspective, I don't necessarily think that they are wrong, because in my conversations as well with insurance companies, I think that the bar maybe I shouldn't be, but it seems that the bar seems to be the lowest, right? If you say a few words, I want to explore being an advisor or a salesperson, all of a sudden, right, I feel like the bar, hey, since you said that, okay, but for everything else, right, the bar is very high. I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts on, like what I mentioned, and where do you think that the industry can get people from, as in like how are you going to how do we address this supply crunch, because not just insurance companies are looking for them, as I mentioned, even consumer banking is looking for them, but how do we address that supply crunch? Because if not, you always, the industry will always be struggling for good agents and representatives and things like that. Any thoughts on that? Because this is a question I've been trying to crack as well with some of my other partners.
So Adrian, I think we touched on this, right? And I'm glad that we have this chance to talk and share, because I do think that it is a perception and it's a misperception that the bar is only lower for sales roles. As I said, I've joined the industry with no insurance background.
Mm.
I've hired many people in my COO roles that
Mm.
have no insurance background. I'm even seeing now in the market, where people are actually appointing CEOs into the roles
With no insurance
when the
background.
CEOs do not have insurance background.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So I think it's a misperception. It might be, I don't know. I mean, it might be the reality 10 years ago, right? Or
Okay.
20 years ago.
Okay.
I think these days the insurance companies are very keen to innovate and digitize. And I think it's not a secret that actually the insurance industry is actually very profitable when compared to consumer banking. But they have underinvested in the infrastructure, and therefore now many perhaps more progressive companies are playing catch up. And when they play catch up, that is where the growth in jobs comes in.
Understand.
And that is where I think people who has the perhaps who has the ambition and the desire, I think that these will be opportunities for you.
Okay. I don't know whether the next question is a bit of a digression, but I also want to talk about something that often comes up in my conversations. I always call it elephants in the room, as in elephants meaning like, let's address the big thing lah. Okay. So one of the things I wanted to say is the whole idea of upskilling and learning, lifelong learning and new things. I think as from men like yourself with so many career switches, right? I think I would guess that you probably embrace it. But what do you think about upskilling? Because oftentimes, when we meet people who just came off a 3-month, 6-month program, new minted skills, but still cannot find any role. So in that sense, how does one maximize upskilling, or how does one maximize the value of something that he or she has invested in, in terms of a course or a course of study, to show, to show the market I have a signal. I'm sending you a signal. I want to go into the industry. I take this course. Very painful, but I took it, whatever it is, and I survived and I did it. How do you think that people can showcase those new skills best? What do
Okay,
you think?
so maybe before I answer that question, I mean, I do want to differentiate between upskilling and reskilling, right? So you're right. I mean, I'm a believer in upskilling, because I've seen many jobs being demised or offshore over the last 20 years.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
So let's say you are in risk management and you see that, oh no, now there's this big thing about Personal Data Protection Act being enacted. Everyone is coming up with guidelines to deal with it. Would you think of upskilling yourself by taking a course on it? Personally, I think the answer is very obvious.
Yep.
I think you should. Now, of course, as I said, it is a personal choice. If you have the time and ambition, I think upskilling has 2 advantages. One, it sends a message to either your current or prospective employer that you are a learner, that you have a growth mindset, and I come to growth mindset in a while.
Agree.
But secondly, I think it strengthens your mind and it makes you more adaptable. Now reskilling to something entirely new is actually, to be honest, less common. But if you think you no longer has an interest in what you're doing and you want to try something new, then I think reskilling can be very, very effective.
Yeah, especially when you find people whose jobs have entirely, like what you mentioned, offshore and no longer existing. Yeah.
Yeah. Or that it is still around, but look, you are no longer interested or you're no longer motivated. I think really reskilling can be very effective. And I think this is where Skills Future and IBF have done particularly well over the recent years, because you are changing people's perception that retraining can be a positive thing, as it should be to begin with. Rather than thinking that, oh no, this is something that I should not be telling people about it.
Right.
So that's the differentiation between the two. I want to say that our passions and what we find interesting in work tends to change as we grow. So for example, say you were a project manager for many years, and you couldn't seem to find the right project management job and you feel unmotivated. I mean, I do think that look for other things that interest you, because there will be other work that interests you. Don't feel constrained that I must always go back to what I've done in the past, because our passions would have changed as well. So
Right.
again, just tying back to what I've said earlier, you know, think about or give yourself the opportunity to look at other jobs and also look at other industry to keep it interesting. And who knows? I mean, maybe that is the formula will get you to a job that that you'll be happy to work to work in.
Yeah, that's a
I think
good
the
point.
last thing is also that upskilling and retraining, in my view, need not always involve a formal course. It can be also attending a conference or a forum or reading up the topic in a very structured manner. That to you, if it's training your brain muscles, it is the same top. It is the same thing. And when you go in an interview, how you then articulate that, even if you don't have a formal course to show, if you're able to articulate to say that, right, I've been very interested in this topic. I've been reading it up. I've been attending conferences. I think it is as good to any employer, as a formal course.
Okay. This next thing is actually goes towards my poor planning skills. I should have asked you this just now. But another elephant in the room campaign. I'm sorry, I don't think we discussed about this, but just honestly, that situation I gave you just now about the two career, like the career pivoter and then the plug and play person. Can I just add another dimension? The career pivoter is 55 years old and the plug and play person is 35 years old. Would that, in honesty, right? Because this enlightens us, be in any way part of a decision factor at all? Because I think another big elephant in the room, and I think recently today newspaper ran a survey, so is the whole notion of age lah. I don't say the word ageism, but age is a factor, to be honest, right? You as a very senior individual in the industry, what is your thoughts? I mean, on like, that scenario, how, if I just overlay another dimension of age, would that kind of change your perception of whether or not, the career pivoter, because he's 20 years older, he loses points, or how? Because I think this is definitely going to be very, very beneficial for the people here, because I think, as I mentioned to you in the first time that we met, our population is the flavor is very PME, which is they're very, very experienced people. So can I put you on the spot again? Don't kill me. Just yeah. What do you think about that? The question.
I would say, okay, so I would say that in any hiring decisions, many factors come into play, right? And I do not deny that sometimes age is one of the factor. But if you were to ask me, I don't think age is the main factor. I think ultimately it goes back to how you're able to demonstrate. I mean, maybe this is where I can talk about the growth mindset.
Yes, please.
I think this is about how you demonstrate to the employer that you are right for the job. And being right for the job can be in various forms. One is about showing that you have an appreciation of the industry and you have a good reason why you want to join the industry. The second one is about diversity of experience and how you can apply those experience to it. The third one, which I think is very important, is that how do you articulate and convince your employer that you have two things? And these two things are very, very in right now.
Okay.
One is about growth mindset. How do you prove that you are doing things that shows that you have a growth mindset?
Right.
And the second one is customer centricity. How do you show that in your experience, you are able to help push the agenda of customer centricity? What are the examples that you can use to show that you are customer centric? I think if the conversation goes well around these few points, I think age would not be that important.
That's great.
Right.
Thanks for chasing the elephants away from the room. So thanks very much for that. Okay, so for myself, when I'm listening to it, right, as I mentioned to you all who are in the audience, maybe I'm gonna try to summarize it before we start attacking some of these questions. Whatever Kian Peng said, for me, really, I extract the elements. And whatever he says, right, I'm just going to try to summarize. Kian Peng, please jump in if I'm wrong. You want to get noticed by someone. How do you get noticed by someone? You got to get noticed by someone by, for example, having a good resume. So listen, guys, whoever's here, these are the things that's going to help you. You have to have a very good resume. If you're a career pivoter, you got to put in an extra effort to show transferable skills. Number one. That's another one. If you feel like age is a factor in your, if you are, how to say, you are, your career pivoted and you are like 55 years old, for example, you have to put in more effort and you have to show um relevancy. Like even if you're 55, you're agile, you've taken all these cool courses, you know the hip and current things that's happening in the market somehow inside the resume. Yeah, you have to kind of show that, so to counter these things. But the question then, with that wonderful resume, with that interview, how do you get even an interview? So like what Campaign said, networking is very important, getting in front of associations, learning about the industry and so on and so forth, and just be it physical events, if we ever come back to that again, or maybe through LinkedIn connections and so on and so forth. I think those are the things that I'm taking from you, Kian Peng, about what you mentioned. I mean, I'm just summarizing because I think it is also a class in career advisory, because a lot of things that you say are the things that we try to guide people on. So thank you very much for that. And do you have anything else to add? Did I miss anything? Did I say things correctly?
Yeah, I mean, if we do a bit of a recap too, right? I mean, I think in summary, don't worry about moving from a specialist role to a generalist role, right? I mean, what you find interesting will change as it progresses through your career, and therefore go with what interests you.
Yeah.
I think the second point is that add diversity to your job search. Don't limit yourself to the same industry and the same job title. And therefore, this is where I say give insurance a try.
Give insurance a try. Yeah.
And I would encourage that that all of us be resilient and keep an open mind. Don't wait for headhunters or your management to offer you a new job. Be proactive about finding the opportunity.
That's great. Yeah.
And then I think last but not least, right, we talk about upskilling and reskilling. Don't underestimate the value of upskilling and reskilling, because it demonstrates a growth mindset and strengthens your mind, and then it allows you to convince people that yes, you are demonstrating a growth mindset. And again, the second one is about customer centricity, right?
Yes,
you have to convince people that you have examples of how you are being that you are customer centric.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, now with that, right, I'm just gonna move on to the chat. I'm so inexperienced that I ask people the right questions in the chat rather than Q&A. I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. My team probably laughing at me now. Okay, so we take the first one. Oliver, sorry I missed yours, Oliver. Oliver asked Kian Peng, what triggers you to change career, Kian Peng? How do you decide when to make the move? Your longest stay in a company is how long? Yeah, basically, chart your 5 or 6 jobs, and basically, what makes you decide to change careers?
Okay, so my longest career is actually the current is the COO job, right, with HSBC. Like that's 7 years. When I was more junior, I mean, I do tend to make a move every 3 to 4 years. But as you progresses, I do think that the time actually stretches longer. Now, it is usually, if you are in a good company and if you are with a very effective team, chances are you would tend not to make a change, and that's what I find as well. Now, but if, for example, these environment have changed, and you find that you are in need of a new challenge, then take the choice and be proactive about it. Because as I said, don't wait for headhunters and senior management to come and offer you a new job. Be proactive about finding what would interest you. And I say, don't limit yourself.
Okay, cool. That's great. Okay, so this is a bit of an open-ended question. I think you can see from C. Teo. If we do not have insurance experience, would potential insurance employers call us for first interview even if we have the transferable skills? I think maybe it's sort of covered by what you said also just now, right? Would you agree a little bit?
Yes, I absolutely. As I said, now within the industry, obviously there are many insurance companies, right? There are progressive ones and there are less progressive ones. The progressive ones would not mark this as a disadvantage. As I said, my experience is that actually the employers are quite open-minded about it.
Okay, cool. And let me see. Terence actually asked, it's more of a statement. A lot still see as pushing products and solutions as I mentioned, right? Not necessarily best fitting for customers' hard sell, but I do see this evolving. Many agents are now more customer centric. Would you agree with this statement? Customer centricity, like you mentioned that we should go there, but you think the industry is already there, or a lot more work to do?
I think I mentioned about the fact that insurance is multifaceted. right?
Yeah.
And therefore, I think what sometimes people's interaction with the industry is with the agents, and the agency is, or intermediaries we call them, are actually just one part of a much bigger industry.
Yes.
And therefore,
Yes.
don't let that influence your perception of what insurance industry is. And the other thing is that you know, sale of insurance product by agency, actually um, that is no longer the dominant. There are many ways of selling insurance product these days. It can also be through a bank. It can be through an insurance broker. It can be through digital. And hence, I think that's where the opportunity is. A lot of insurance is trying to move into putting insurance into a larger ecosystem. But how do you enable that? Then that's where you need people outside of insurance industry to contribute to build the infrastructure. If you think about, so for example, income is also doing quite a lot of great innovation, like the snack
Yeah.
product. It may not really be very profitable at the moment, but they are they're just trying a lot of ideas. And when they do that, you need people outside of the insurance industry
Yeah,
to
different
help.
perspectives. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so the next question is from Val. Val, she says, Camping, you mentioned insurance industry is looking for UX designers, project managers, digital implementers. However, we went pitching for digitalization projects, but insurance manufacturers weren't very receptive 3 years ago because they still survive with or without digitalization. So what has changed besides COVID, where the distribution is by agencies/banks and they are doing the digitalization? Do you kind of get the question? I hope you do.
Yeah, I think insurance companies obviously have come around. As I said, there is a general perception that insurance is a laggard, in technology rollout or technology investment compared to perhaps other banks, or other financial services like the consumer banking. And I think things are changing. And of course, I think the COVID has proven the fact that while the consumer banking are not as profitable, insurance is continuously being very, very profitable. And therefore, there is a much larger appetite for investment. But I would say that actually a lot of insurance companies would like to build things on their own. So perhaps Val is coming from an angle to say that can a third-party vendor be part of the chain of implementation. Now, there are companies that actually pursue such a strategy, but I think there are also many insurance companies that rather build their own implementation team themselves.
Teams.
And this is where I think the opportunities for job seekers are, because you are joining the insurance company directly as employees. You're not joining because the insurance company wants to build their own capability.
Got it. Okay, so I hope that helps. Okay, so Andrew's asking a question. I don't know, maybe Andrew's a fresh grad, but can you please comment on like potential career trajectories and outlooks for fresh grads with maybe a formal discipline, actuarial science? Ooh, that's actuarial
well,
science.
I have to say,
graduates.
Andrew, you are in the right spot.
You are hot in demand, actuarial sciences.
In Singapore, actuaries are very, very in demand. And therefore, to be honest, I have no worry for you at all.
Andrew, at least one person is like gonna be happy now. You're good. That's great. Any short courses for people in actuarial science that they can they can pick up the skill sets quickly? I mean, just a cheeky question, but I totally agree. I think actuarial science is quite a revered subject lah. For example, okay. So Andrew, I hope that makes your day. Okay. So DK, again, I was mentioning earlier, perceives it as, when I think of insurance, I perceive it as like a sales role, right? I'm not salesy in nature. How realistic is it to start an operational role without frontline experience? I think should be okay because it's a different role.
I think we answered that question.
Right? But he also goes to ask, are there any useful credentials or exams to show employers motivation? Anything that you think could be like really sweet? Okay, you can't take an actuarial science degree too long, but any other thing do you think that would be quite useful, quite relevant from an operational nature, perhaps?
So I guess again, just recap what we said earlier, right? When you want to demonstrate to your employer that you have a interest, you need to be able to quote some of the changes that is happening in the industry.
Okay.
So look at LIA, look at GIA website for the references. Understand a little bit about what's happening in the background. There are many stats that are being published. I think this is all easily available information. And then go and be prepared with examples about how you demonstrate growth mindset, how you are customer centric. I think these are important. Being able to articulate how your experience in other industry adds value.
Okay.
I think that will help.
Okay. At this juncture, I know we have 5 minutes, and I want to do a few things. I want to ask you a couple more questions. From the audience, I want to ask you one question, but also at this juncture, Serene, if you're here, if you don't mind, can you launch the usual survey that we normally do? So for everybody that's here, you'll be very familiar with the survey. We want to know how we did, whether or not you enjoyed the conversation. Now, here's the funny thing. At the end of the survey, we normally ask, which sectors are you interested in? So normally, insurance, to be honest, is always at the lowest. So today, after this session, I would expect that it's going to go up. So, no pressure, but just leaving you. So anyway, this survey will literally take you 15 to 20 seconds at most, but it will do us a world of value, because we want to know what we can do for you in the future. So we are collating this, and we're going to see the trends and so on and so forth, what you guys are asking for. So thanks to everybody who's participating and doing the survey. Thank you. While I ask Kian Peng some more questions. Yeah. Okay. So Kian, let's go back to some of the questions. Okay. Again, Val's got good questions, but very broad. When you say the insurance industry is growing, Kian Peng, which part of the supply chain are you referring to, and which aspect? Okay, we know that advisors, right? Sure, guaranteed, that's one. Anything else that's you feel that's really growing?
I think there's just a lot of focus on operations.
Okay.
And by operations, I do mean not just policy servicing and customer service, right? I'm really talking about project management, risk, first line risk management. These are definitely growing.
Okay.
And therefore, take a look at what's out there. Actually, if you just do a very quick Google search and say maybe insurance jobs in Singapore, immediately Google will give you a wide whole list of roles, and you realize that a lot of them are actually non-sales. They're non-sales.
That's good.
So don't be mistaken that the industry is only looking for sales jobs.
I think it's good to hear. I mean, really, because I was going to ask you, Kian Peng, later to declare. I want everyone to know it is not just about. So I think it's very good, because I think far too often when people say the word insurance, they immediately have almost like an allergic reaction to it, simply because they think of that salesperson that tries to push your product. But as you mentioned, and something that I've come to realize in working with these companies as well, is that there's so much more under the iceberg. What's visible. So thank you very much for that. Okay, let me see. Let me see. Okay, so I don't know. Terence has asked a question. I don't know whether we can answer this one. What is this? Terence says, I see the industry is very, very dynamic moving forward. How do you think AI will transform parts of the industry, in particular the front end interaction with clients and the premium calculations? If you look into the crystal ball, what do you see? I don't know whether you can talk about how AI might influence positively and negatively about the industry. And I know I also have, I speak to, interesting companies like robo advisories and stuff like that, but I don't know how, I haven't actually decided how I feel about that. But what is your thoughts on, AI, and how will it augment the industry? What do you think?
I would say that, and of course, this is my personal belief, right?
Yeah.
I do think that AI is going to transform not just the financial services industry, but across everyone. Now, the question here is about case studies. Which industry and within financial services, which segment are able to demonstrate the most convincing case studies? And I think that will set the perception. Now, on this front, because of how far ahead consumer banking is, I do think that the AI will probably have more compelling case studies coming out from the consumer banks. But that doesn't mean that there is no place for insurance. It's just that perhaps the implementation of AI in the insurance, when it comes to pricing, for example, these are very, invisible to consumers, and therefore they will not be generally, published and broadcast, and you therefore will not hear about it. Now, but it just doesn't mean that because people don't hear about it, it's not happening.
Exist. Yeah.
I just feel that most of the time, we are very much swayed by what we see on the media, and obviously the consumer banking will probably have a much more compelling and interesting case studies.
Yeah.
And therefore you will hear more from the consumer banking than insurance.
Fantastic. Okay, so I know that we're almost out of time. So my question is basically for everybody lah. Now, before you go, Peng, I just want to ask, any final words or advice or encouragement for the people who are here today and who may be in, maybe in transition, maybe find themselves in the open, looking for a bit of a new career, a bit lost and things like that. Any words of encouragement from you to them, to everyone here?
I think everyone has to really look into themselves and find motivation. I think when you go through a job search process, and when the process gets longer, I think it is natural for people to be demotivated.
Yeah.
And therefore, just going back to reflecting upon whether are you just limiting yourself because you're applying for the same job and as in the same industry. What would interest you? Because as I said, interests change. And also perhaps reflects about if you have been inviting into interviews, but you may not be able to secure it at the very last minute, then it means that your CV is no problem. Then it is about how do you rehearse and get over and give right examples about customer centricity, about growth mindset. I think all these things will count. And then ultimately, I think if we talk about reading up on our topics, retraining or upskilling, this is as much as keeping your minds fresh and keeping your minds active. And I think that actually will help with job securing a job.
Thank you, Peng. Just final words from me. I think in between the session, I've added a few of my thoughts as a career advisor. Peng kind of like added a bit more things. I just want to say, I know, guys, I mean, for the people that are here, the truth is, what you see Peng here, you think he's very successful, and he is, but that's not that. I mean, we're all humans and we all have our own professional setbacks. And we could have dedicated an entire session on professional setbacks. But I think the key is everyone has it, but one must find the fortitude and the strength to carry on. And there's some, and carrying on will dictate that you need to do certain things very well, like what Peng mentioned. So I just want to end this session by number one saying thank you to everybody that showed up today. I hope this was sound of useful for you. Obviously, Peng, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with us and dressing up whereas I didn't. So if there's anything else, as I mentioned, I know my colleagues have put in an email address. If you feel that you need to talk to someone on your career, feel free to just write us an email or ask for appointment. We'll have a one-to-one. We'll try to identify some of the pain points that you might have and try to get you up into shape, whichever aspect you feel that you're struggling with. I just want to tell everybody, and I think Peng, I think you also echo this, I don't think you're ever alone. You always have friends and allies in the market. So try to make use of these people and the resources that you have. I want to wish everybody good luck in everything. Hope to see some of you. Best wishes for a very good weekend, and see you at the next workshop or webinar. Again, Peng, thanks so much for your time, and I'll see you soon.